What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we're going to be answering a question that came from one of our viewers last week when we were doing a live podcast, and I wanted to go into it. It's kind of fun talking about trash talk. Trash talk is one of those things where it gets people riled up, and basically, we'll get into this question in a second, but I'll give my thoughts on it and its utility and some different ideas on it. And big thanks to our sponsors that help make the podcast possible. Charlotte's Web. You can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 to get 20% off the order. I'm a huge fan of their stuff. Again, if you're someone that maybe suffers from a lot of inflammation after training, like, you can feel that soreness after training a lot, or if you deal with a lot of stress and stuff like that, CBD can be a really helpful thing. That's something that I personally started using CBD for, was primarily to deal with inflammation in certain muscle groups after training. And it helped out with that dramatically, like game-changing dramatically. And so after that, I was pretty much sold on it. And then one of the side benefits that I didn't sort of anticipate it like contributing to was the level of stress that I have. And so there's different things that contribute to this, but it definitely helps. It helps you remain calm in sort of stressful situations and things like this. And I'll say it that way because you have to be careful with what you say. Because again, it's not FDA approved. But again, that said, I've really, really enjoyed the product. And so I encourage everybody to give it a try. If you haven't used CBD before, try it out for a month and see what kind of effects it has on you. Like me, you'll probably find other things that you didn't expect it'll help with. Like I said, I took it for inflammation related to training. Like I was getting a really sore up in my upper shoulders, my mid back. And I had this one spot that would just flare up and would get really inflamed. And I noticed that when I used CBD balm on it, and then when I started taking the tincture, it helped out dramatically. And then I had all these other positive effects from it. And so again, check them out. Use the stuff for about a month and see what kind of effects you have on it. Again, promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 at checkout to save 20% off your order at charlottesweb.com. Also, thanks to Matt at Epic Roll for helping make the podcast possible so that we can hang out with you guys every week. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu to save 15% off your order. Again, Matt makes really cool Jiu-Jitsu gear, high quality stuff, great designs. It was one of the reasons why I paired up with him to do a rash guarded shorts order a number of months ago. We'll probably be doing some in the near future. But again, until then, he's got a lot of really good stuff. For those of you watching, I'm wearing one of his shirts right now. And again, if you watch any of my YouTube videos, if you see me with a shirt on that isn't a Jiu-Jitsu shirt, it's probably a Epic Roll shirt. I really like his stuff. And so we're happy to have him as a sponsor on the podcast. And again, if you want to check out any of his stuff, his rash guards, gis, shirts, no-gi shorts that have no Velcro on them, which is amazing, check them out at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu to save 15% on the order. And thanks to our sponsor, Manscaped, for helping make the podcast possible. They're the best in men's grooming, and they have amazing products for whatever it is that you might have to groom as a man. Again, they have a trimmer that's kind of the flagship product that they have, which is their lawnmower, which is a trimmer. It's waterproof. It's powerful. It's got skin-safe technology, so you're not nicking yourself when you're down there trimming yourself or anywhere else. I personally use that sucker pretty much everywhere on my body. So when people say, "Hey, Chewy, how do you trim your beard?" I use the Manscaped trimmer to do that. And again, if you guys want to check out any of their grooming products, whether you are a man or you're searching for a man in your life, check them out at manscaped.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping at checkout. So it's a great deal. And again, you can look on their website. They have a lot of different products that I didn't mention, everything from balms and soaps and shampoos to trimmers and nose trimmers, everything that you could possibly think of that you might need to groom yourself as a man, to smell good and everything else. Check them out at manscaped.com. And again, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And if you would like to join our email newsletter, join my email newsletter, you can do so by going to jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. For joining, I'll send you 3 free ebooks, and you'll get access to my daily email that I send out typically Monday through Friday. So guys, with all that said, let's jump into the podcast. What's up, guys? So today's podcast, we're going to start off with a question. So last week we did a live podcast. So we got a bunch of questions that were really good that I didn't have a chance to get to during the podcast, and I wanted to answer some of them both in video and on the podcast. And so here's the question from Chris today. It's about trash talking in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and combat sports. He says, what are your thoughts on humble top-tier grapplers who feel they may need to change their personality to play into the modern game of trash talk and controversy? And then how do or how may top-tier competition black belts approach this growing trend in jiu-jitsu and combat sports that places a premium on trash talk and controversy in order to find new fights? So let's talk about that in two sections. One is going to be my thoughts on competitors who feel they may need to change it, and then how may top-tier grapplers approach the whole growing trend. So let's talk about it this way. This idea, first off, from your message, Chris, I feel like you don't like it, that like trash talk and controversy is not something that you enjoy, and you see it as kind of you said the modern game of trash talk and controversy. So let's talk about that. Trash talk and controversy is something that's been going on in sports for a long time, especially in the United States, right? It's something that we like. We can say that we don't, but people get real up in arms about controversy. I mean, you can look at how erratic the news is today. Like at the time of recording this, within the last month, the news cycle has gone from the virus to Ukraine, which made the friggin' like we went from Save Lives to Warhawks. And then the next week it was Trans Swimmer. And then the next week now it's Chris Rock got slapped by Will Smith. And everybody's like fighting over that, whether they think it's right or wrong. It's crazy. It's so erratic. And, you know, it's so interesting. It's like nothing actually ever gets accomplished from any of it. It's just like, it's like they get you pissed off and angry, then they move on to the next thing. But it's this controversy thing. It just gets people all riled up. So it's something that we like. I mean, I don't really care for it that much, but you know, I bought a Conor McGregor pay-per-view here or there, so I'm not immune to it. But again, we're the reason why this happens, because if people didn't play into the controversy, then the fighters wouldn't do it. The promoters wouldn't care. But since they do, therefore, that's what they get all entertained from it. Because the reality is most people in today's society, especially in the United States, are bored. I mean, we can fight about this all we want to, but if you just give it an honest try in the country, you can probably get by with your basic necessities, right? I'm not saying you're going to live a lavish, luxurious life, but if you even just put forth an effort, you can probably get by all right. And so that leaves you with all this ample time to sit around and feel bored. And plus, a lot of people aren't able to do meaningful work or things or chase after meaningful goals. And so they're sitting around kind of bored, and this stuff entertains. It's fun. It's entertainment. And that's really what it is. At the end of the day, you got to remember that fighting and things like that, when you're talking about spectator sports, are entertainment. So with that said, there has been this trash talk, controversy, brashness in sports for a long time. I mean, you can go back to look at Muhammad Ali in boxing. He was known as the greatest, and a lot of people look back at him as a hero. But during his day, he was not a well-liked guy. I mean, it was like half and half. He's very polarizing, and a lot of people went to see the shows or see his boxing matches because they wanted to see him lose. And he made a lot of money because of it. One of his other nicknames was the Louisville Lip, because he had a big mouth and he wasn't afraid to voice whatever he wanted to say. And he had this very poetic way of talking trash, and we get under people's skin and the whole thing. Back in the 90s, you know, with football, I remember there was Deon Sanders, right? He had the moniker of Primetime Deon Sanders, Neon Deon Sanders. And what's interesting about him is he had this very arrogant and like brash thing that he did. By the way, he's an amazing athlete. Mm-hmm. I mean, he played a major league baseball game, hopped on a jet, flew over, and then played a playoff game of football, right? I mean, it's freaking intense. The guy's an amazing athlete, but he was a guy who played cornerback, which at the time was not a really well-paid position. And, you know, he's looking at these quarterbacks and all these guys making all kinds of money. He's like, well, I'm going to have to put out this persona. So he has primetime persona. He's wearing the gold chains. He's a good looking guy. And he's very arrogant. He's talking about this stuff, all this stuff. Now, what's interesting about Deon Sanders, I think, is that is his persona is this guy, right? But then behind the scenes, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't use profanity. He's kind of a family man, you know? Like when he was on the Cowboys, there was like the The stark contrast of like Michael Irving was like cussing people out, and then Deon Sanders is like holding his daughter, his kids, or whatever. Like it's a persona. He's playing this character so that this way he can get eyeballs, and it worked because the dude made a lot of money. He had video games named after him, the whole deal, right? And then in MMA, more recently, you had Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen like created this whole persona, and out of these three athletes, Chael Sonnen's probably like the one that probably was not the best, right? Because Deon Sanders is a freak athlete. Muhammad Ali was a very, very good fighter first time. And Chael Sonnen was like, he's above average 100%, but he typically most of the time was not like the best guy there, right? Mm-hmm. But he had a good string of fights. And he had this persona, the bad boy from the mean streets of Westland, Oregon, right? It's so ridiculous.
Hey, it's not so ridiculous now. He's got like a bunch of charges filed against him. But
from the one guy?
Yeah, because they did something they were like talking crap about his wife or something.
They were talking about his wife.
Anyway, and but but hey, that's kind of interesting, right? He backs it up. He can back his talk up a little bit.
But and to go back to that, like if you actually look at it, like the dude was being very vulgar with his wife,
right?
Absolutely. So it was not a good situation.
He did probably the thing that most of us would do in that situation, or should do in that situation, is to protect their loved one from that. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little different if you're in like a tuxedo and you're out in front of people and nothing's gonna happen. It's a little different if you're in a situation where you have like drunk guys like ogling your wife and saying nasty stuff, but he was doing that, and he was winning fights at the time,
for sure.
And he had this whole persona that he cooked up, and he was so good. Like, I mean, it was basically, he was like a pro wrestler meets Muhammad Ali, because he would say the same poetic stuff. Yep. He would, I can like watch videos of him, like where it'll be like Chael Sonnen, it's like ridiculous for 15 minutes. And it's so entertaining. And you can see he would get under people's skin doing it. And then obviously now in Jiu-Jitsu, we have guys like Gordon Ryan, who, does his thing. Tim Spriggs is kind of starting to do something with his persona. And, again, these guys are getting attention. Now, you can look at this however you would like. You can see it as a bad thing. But the reality is that when it comes down to people, like high earning people, like as far as incomes go, pretty much always the people that are high earning incomes, they're in the business of being themselves, besides whatever else they do. This is not just sports. This is also like, think about Elon Musk and Tesla. You can't separate the two, right? Elon Musk is in the business of being Elon Musk and doing whatever Elon Musk does. You can look at people that basically have no product or real service to the world, like a Kardashian, and they make tons of money from a tweet. They're like, hey, check this out, whatever. And they make $1 million, right? Because they're in the business of being themselves. And so, this is something that a lot of fighters, whether they like it or not, they have to create some sort of persona. Now, here's the deal. You don't have to go the trash talk controversy route. You can create other personas. There are other personas that you can do. The issue that I think a lot of times comes down to is that a lot of fighters are kind of lazy. Like fighters and stuff like that are disciplined and they're very motivated to train and fight, because I think it probably comes natural to them. This is just my opinion. Yeah. I think that a lot of guys, like, a lot of black belts that I talked to, for instance, it wasn't hard for them to do jiu-jitsu. It didn't take a lot of motivation and discipline. They liked training. Like, training was exciting for them. They would try to fight everything that they could in order to square away a little time to train. It wasn't that difficult. It wasn't like they had to fight to motivate themselves to do it. They wanted to do it. And I've met a lot of black belts from doing some of the consulting work that I've been doing, where, they're great athletes, they're great coaches, this, whatever, but then trying to get them to do some of the business stuff, which isn't necessarily fun and exciting, right? It's like pulling teeth. I'm like, bro, where's all that discipline that you talk about to your students? Let's use some of that over here. Like, go do your work. But it's more difficult. And so I think that sometimes, with fighters, you watch some of them, it's like I've met several fighters and they would train really hard, and then when they're done training, they're playing video games all day. Like, it's like, man, you could be developing a personality. You could improve your ability to speak in front of people and, these sort of things, and improve your vocabulary. So you have more words that you can choose upon when you want to start talking some trash or, entertaining crowds or whatever. And again, it's just the nature of the beast. And so I think that it would be wise for fighters or competitors to put together some persona. Again, it doesn't have to be a trash talking one. That's to me like the lowest hanging fruit, because it's just easy, right? to craft a persona that's going to connect with people on a deeper level, it's much more of a strategic thing that you have to plan down the road. Trash talking is very easy. And I think that a lot of times the guys in jiu-jitsu that do it well, they're good at it. But then there's the other ones that are just, I can't tell if they just take it personal or if they just suck at it, because then they'll get on there and they'll just say mean things to people online, and it just kind of falls flat. It doesn't really have any interest to him. It's not interesting because it's not connected to a whole persona. It's just someone saying something mean. And so, yeah, as far as what I think about it, I don't think anything negative or positive about it. It just is, right? And it's a condition of society. If people in society didn't enjoy it, they wouldn't do it. But because people really like the controversy, it's what people are going to do to get fights and get more publicity, get more money for themselves and everything else. And again, you can choose to dislike it, but at the end of the day, you're not paying their medical bills. You're not paying their retirement. So it is what it is. And then the other side of it is that, again, there's lots of different ways to do it. And I think that if you're a fighter or if you're a competitor or someone like that, it would be wise to craft a persona. Again, the persona could be an exaggerated version of yourself, but crafting something that allows you to connect with people on a deeper level so that then you can, be front of mind when they want to watch a fight or when they're going to watch a competition or whatever it might be.
I think it's necessary. I believe it or not, I feel like, I don't want to say that I love it. I think some people do it really well.
Yeah.
Like you've got, if we want to take MMA, for example, look at Colby Covington, who every time he gets on the mic, he makes me want to, they talk about Henry Cejudo being the king of cringe or whatever.
Yeah,
dude, Colby is like, it's just, I was like, oh, it just weird. It just creeps.
What does he say that makes you cringe?
It's just how he says it. He's just like, it seems so rehearsed and just like a routine, doesn't come off natural. I can't even say, and plus like the whole thing with him and Jorge Masvidal, he was like talking about his kids and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's kind of going over the line. Like there's certain things you can talk shit about, like don't talk about their family, their kids, or kind of religion kind of stuff. But like you talk to them, you suck at this or you're not good, whatever. But like about family, what's that?
I disagree.
We disagree in what way?
I mean, it's like if you're, to me, it's like, I like, for instance, like I've seen people try to take up for Will Smith, for instance, right? Okay. Well, he was talking about his wife. So the fuck what? Like
it's about
I
what
get it.
You say like that.
Right.
Let's talk about that on the Patreon. We'll talk about that on the Patreon. Like I feel like it's not a blanket. It's not a blanket thing. Like you could talk about, make jokes, but that's like, as far as like that, we're talking about an actor or a comedian. Sure. If we're talking about like an MMA fighter or a jiu-jitsu practitioner, like that's different. I mean, that doesn't really play into it. I don't think it does anything. It's just there to piss people off. And I don't think it actually builds anything onto the fight. It doesn't create any kind of substantial drama that would, I think, make me more.
Well, think about it. If you see this guy getting really pissed off, like, hey, man, don't talk about my mom or my kids or whatever, and you see a guy getting a visceral reaction, that's like, oh, shit, it's real, right? Like, oh, man. Like, because a lot of times when you watch these feuds, you're like, okay, is this being just beefed up for the fight, whatever? Yeah. But then if it looks like it's real, it's like, oh, dude, this is a real thing, whatever, and when you're in that entertainment spotlight, if you're going to get into the business of trash talking, to me, it's like one of those things where, look, man, you got to have thick skin and you got to be ready for it to come up, because, I mean, who knows what these people are going to bring up? It's like, for instance, you can draw the line at the kid or whatever. You can draw the line at the family.
Sure.
But then what happens if society changes where you're like, well, we can't talk about this. We can't talk about this. And then it becomes almost like a comedic thing where then, like in a lot of comedy, like, because it becomes so, like, everything becomes so censored to be politically correct. You're like, well, what can we talk about then? Yeah. So how can you be entertaining if you can't make it real? Because if we know that, because one, like you said, if they're not polished speakers, if they're not polished, like with a rehearsal of their lines where they're going to, like, I'm going to deliver the zinger to them, right? If you can't do that, if they're not going to do that, and then they're going to rely on just saying some crazy stuff to get a rise out of people. And if you can't get that rise out of someone, you don't see the visceral reaction. It's going to be like, not really interested. Right. But when you see people go, mother, and they really want to beat him up, then you're like, yeah, let's see what's going to happen. Because he's been talking trash. We want to see him get his face caved in, that kind of thing.
I think for a couple ways, trash talking, increases the stakes. Like you got to be able to back it up too. Like Gordon, people know how good he is, and he knows how good he is, and people kind of want to see him. I think that the competitors and the other athletes want to see him lose really badly. I think just because he's he's kind of crapped on everybody. And I think it could bring out the best in his opposition or the worst in them, because they might get under their skin, and then they're not going to be able to perform. You know, like fighting angry or being kind of really angry. You're more likely to make mistakes.
Sure.
You know, I think you'll be more likely to make an error. And so I think like competing angrily is going to probably be to your detriment. I think that's why people do it as well. That's why you talk crap, because if you can get somebody off their game, right? If you get them off of their composure, they're maybe unfocused, or they're going to do things that are uncharacteristic. That's an advantage. So you got to think, you talk because you hype up the fight or get more eyeballs, but you also hype because you're trying to get in their head, and you're trying to throw them off to give yourself any kind of advantage. Right. Perfect example, Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo. You know what I'm saying? He just ran at him in that fight, and it was very uncharacteristic. We've never seen Jose get knocked out like that, ever. And it was a perfect. It was like he was grooming him for that moment for all those months. And it was just very, it was crazy to see it play out like that. So that's just an example, I think, why an athlete would do that.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on context. It can be done well, or it can be done very poorly. You see it with Chael Sonnen. Like you said, he's kind of, he's a guy that didn't quite ascend to that championship level, right? He was right there a couple of times. He had a double-digit losses in his career, quite a few. And I mean, he was getting these fights with John Jones coming off a loss. You know what I'm saying? Getting these fights he should never gotten. But they knew, like, he's a middleweight coming up to light heavyweight, fighting the greatest light heavyweight of all time. We already know he's going to get slaughtered,
but he's going to sell it.
Still wanting to watch. Yeah, they knew he'd sell it. So that advantage is huge. Like, Chael is one of the best at doing that. But then you got guys like Colby Covington, who's horrible at it, I think. And for him, it does work to his advantage too, though, because people now want to see him get his ass kicked. Yeah. Because they just think he's just such a cheesy dude.
Yeah, no. So Colby goes out there and he's cheesy. You know, wears his like MAGA hat that pisses people off, and you know, this kind of thing. And you know, from what I remember, I mean, like he didn't always used to be this way. No. And then he put on this act and this persona to get people's attention, right? Like I think what was it? Kamaru Usman was talking about him on like an interview where he said, you know, he saw Colby Covington, and this is like, I guess Colby Covington had said something on an internet forum or something. So he's like, I'm gonna go talk to him. He comes up to him and he's like ready to just like tell him what he thinks. And then Colby's like, hey man, how's it going, brother? How you feeling? Whatever. You know, it's like very nice. And then it kind of took him off, and he's, oh, okay. And then later on, like, you know, Colby gets on like the internet, goes, man, if I see you at the airport again, you know, and he starts talking, you know, and it's at that point you got to be like, dude, this isn't real. Like this isn't, he's not being real. It's like, this is a thing to sell fights. And I mean, this is like one of the things where I've seen people like, you know, and we talked about this before, talk about how, you know, UFC fighters should be paid more, which I agree 100%. I would love to see them get paid more, but at the same time, you got to think about this, like think about how many people the UFC employs. That's a part of like their marketing department. How many people have to make these videos and do interviews and basically do stuff to pull teeth to get fighters to like be interesting, because most of these fighters, like, they don't do anything to put themselves out there. So it's basically like they're training to fight. That's what they're doing. And if they don't have a machine behind them to pump them up, you're never going to know about them. You know, you'll never know about them. And so in that sense, it's like, it's one of those things where you realize how important that stuff is. So again, if the fighters are not going to get themselves out there, the UFC is going to put them out in front of them. But you see that a lot of times and this is not true just in fighting. This is everywhere, where people that, you know, push themselves forward a little bit, or they're willing to put themselves out there a little bit more, they get ahead.
What do you think about, and this is something, you know, when you're at the gym and you train with your trainer, you don't submit and tell, right? You don't say, oh, I knocked this dude out or did this. How do you feel about that? I mean, especially, I think,
what is it now?
So if somebody talks smack about, like, man, I knocked you out, or I submitted you in practice, blah blah blah, I'm better than you. Like you saw that a lot. Like Francis Ngannou had that, like, with some video with his training partner. You saw that, like, with Colby and Masvidal will talk about, you know, like, I dropped a dude, or I used to, like, you know, drop him, you make him quit and practice, kind of thing. What do you think about that being a topic of, I guess if they're no longer training partners, it's fair game, right? Yeah. But that's something, it's almost like an agreement that we make, like, hey, I'm not going to talk about what happens in practice between us.
Yeah, usually no. But like, if you're trying to build a fight up, like, then it's just like comedy, right? So when it comes to comedy, like everything's pretty much on the table, right? It's on the table, and just suck it up. It's okay. Like, and it may make you go or whatever, but it's okay. That's comedy. It's entertainment. And with the pre-fight theatrics, it's entertainment. And so you're going to say whatever you got to say to build the fight in order to make people interested. So if you talk about, wow, who's going to win this fight? And everybody's questioning, like, is it going to be like Cyril or is it going to be Ngannou? Because so-and-so did this in the gym and whatever else. Or, man, Masvidal did this to Kobe in the gym and da-da-da. Who's going to win come Saturday, right? Whatever you can do to get people talking. At that point, it becomes on the table. Now, assuming you weren't fighting, you don't talk about it. So for instance, it's like if someone came up and was like asking and they weren't fighting, it's like, no, you don't talk about that. But for the entertainment theatrics to build a fight, of course, you'll use anything. You'll use anything you got, right? So I think it depends on the context. And the context is with entertainment. Entertainment is different than non-entertainment situations, right? It's just nature of the beast. If like some guy's like saying nasty stuff to your wife and you're just like, and you're out in a hotel, it's a different situation than like, you guys are getting ready to fight each other and you're just saying crazy stuff to try to piss each other off so that you can get a rise out of one another in order to sell the fight. Yeah. It's just the way it is.
What do you like say? I mean, you've had the situation where when you fought MMA that people were kind of disrespectful or said some things to you. How do you say somebody's dealing with that? Maybe they're a jiu-jitsu athlete going into a big tournament, or even an MMA fighter that's going in to a fight and they're dealing with that for the first time. Like, what was some ways that you kind of used that to your advantage, or kind of ignored it or didn't let it get under your skin?
Well, when I was younger, the way I would have dealt with it now versus then, completely different.
Well, let's talk about then, and then like how it helped or how it hurt you, and then we'll talk about it now.
When I was younger, there were two different versions of Chewy that would fight in the ring. There was the guy that would run across the cage, and then there was the guy that would touch gloves and then fight. If you talk trash before the fight, there was no touching gloves. I was running across the cage, and I was going to try to hurt you because I was like, you're being disrespectful, so I'm trying to hurt you. And the reason for that was we weren't selling fights, right? Like to talk trash, like right before we're coming out to bring it, like F off, or like when I weighed in one time and like, again, we're not like on one of my first pro fights, the guy's bucking up to me, won't even shake my hand. So I'm like, okay, like you're incredibly disrespectful. To come tomorrow, I'm going to whoop you. I'm going to try to hurt you, and like, I mean, that's the way that I was thinking. And then if the guy was respectful, I'd come out, touch gloves, and we would have this very sportsman-like thing. It was just, that was the two differences, because we're not selling fights if like nobody knows who we are and we're getting ready to fight. Then it becomes how we fight matters. People are already in the seats. This isn't on pay-per-view. People are going to find us. That's what's going to happen, right? And so I was, a lot of times when back then I would take that as disrespectful. If we were selling fights, it would have made sense, but we weren't selling fights. Now, if someone was to do that, the reality is that nobody's words can truly approach you unless you allow them to. So like if someone says something to you and it bothers you because either there's some truth to it or you let it connect to you. And that's the reality, right? And so if it bothers you, that's on you. Because again, like if someone says something, you can say, nah, whatever, you can just shake it off. You don't have to even give it any attention. Now again, I know that there's a protective element, especially with men. There's a protective element with like our families and our women and stuff like that. And like in a normal situation that's not entertainment related, completely understand, right? If some guy's like said something about Jess, or some guy was saying something nasty to Jess, like it's going to be bad for him, right? And I'm sure it'd be the same way if someone was saying something mean about your kids, like it's probably going to be bad for him. But in an entertainment situation, it's just one of those things where that's what you're signing up for. Like if it's just the nature that it's one of the things that's going to come with the job title. Now, you get into a situation where you guys are trying to sell a fight. You're just going to have to be ready to be a little thicker skinned than normal, because people are going to say stuff. And again, a week from now, nobody's going to remember a lick of it. Nobody cares. They're on to the next thing that's going on, right? Everybody's so stimulated, so they're on to the next thing. And so you've got to be a little bit more thick-skinned, and you've got to not allow it to sink in as much, and it's just the reality.
I think in the situation, and possibly this could be some accuracy to it, maybe not, but like when you're not selling a fight and somebody's talking trash to you, they're trying to kind of either convince themselves or pump themselves up, trying to get themselves riled up, ready to go. I think sometimes they're doing it more for themselves. If they can get you out of your game, that's just a bonus, right? But a lot of times, like if you watch the documentary The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, he would kind of talk trash and he would say things, and he would do that because he needed a little juice. He needed to kind of fire himself up a little bit. And I think he maybe used that as a motivator for himself, right? He'd make it like, oh, it's you against me. Like they wouldn't even say anything. It'd be some random comment, and he would just take it and twist it out of context. Yeah. So sometimes it's a motivator for themselves.
Well, and I feel like his was very much like a specific competitive element, right?
Yeah, for sure.
He wasn't talking about their families. He wasn't trying to criticize their character. He was just like telling them, like, you better bring it tomorrow or something, like that kind of. He was being very competitive with them, and so that's just like emotions running high during competition. It's completely normal. And like I said, I think trash talking versus that kind of thing is a little different. Trash talking, I guess you could consider it trash talking, but like, that kind of trash talking isn't going to sell a fight. It's not going to sell an event. Nobody cares. It's too mild nowadays, Yeah. So, and again, I think this is part of the issue too, right? Is that we've become so desensitized to everything that people have to keep pushing the ante. I mean, if you look at, like, say, Muhammad Ali's trash talking back in the day, he's talking.
Yeah, it was mild.
Yeah, it's very mild compared to what we're used to, because he's saying these friggin' poems about how he's going to knock Joe Frazier out, right? Yeah. And he's like talking about, like, George Foreman's too slow, right? He'd like talk about how slow he was or whatever, and he would talk about this stuff, and and again, by today's standards, incredibly mild, because now everybody's like ready to attack people's character, their wives, their families, and stuff like that. And I don't necessarily, by the way, I don't like that. I'm telling you, I don't like it when people talk about their families and stuff like that. And I understand why emotions run high, and I understand why Khabib jumped into the crowd and did what he did. Right. I get it. It's just one of those things where that's where we've come to as a society. Just, like it or not, it's just where we are, because we become so desensitized. Everything's been like pushed. Everything's been supercharged to the point where, because everybody's trying to get attention, and you're fighting for attention in a world full of other people trying to fight for attention. It's just a mess.
You're trying to one up each other, like, because it becomes the norm. This type of trash talking doesn't have the same impact or effect that it did. So now you got to up it a little more. You got to throw in some jabs at this or that. Like, I mean, I get it, and I don't know if I think trash talking, I think is going to be. It's going to always be there, and I think whether you like it or not, it has some use and importance. And I think you have to have that, because it's kind of like the counterbalance, right? You have trash talkers, you have people that don't talk trash. You have people that fight one way versus. It's just, there's got to be balance, right? You have to have light and dark. You have to have up and down. You have to have that variability.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it is what it is. I don't really get too interested in it. Like, for the most part, like, for instance, in Jiu-Jitsu, I never really know what the trash talk is going on, because I mute most of the pages. Most of the guys that follow, like, or that do the trash talking, I either don't follow them or I mute them.
Okay.
Just because I don't want to see it. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care about the fabricated stuff that you're trying to push out. I don't care. It's the reason why I mute a lot of stuff, because I just don't want to see all this constant controversy, because it's so short-lived. It's like every week. Like, the reason is I want to be in control of my own thoughts. And so I don't like to have people putting stuff in front of me that just angers me or gets me riled up, and then I lose control of my own thoughts.
Yeah.
That said, I understand why people do it. They're trying to sell stuff and try to get it out there.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, do you think it takes away from jiu-jitsu? Like, do you think it's does it make the sport look bad? Does it make it look more legitimate, because you do have controversy and more people are paying attention? I mean, do you think if you could have your perfect jiu-jitsu world, do you think you'd want to see trash talking as a part of it?
Here's something to consider. The idea of this, like, mystical martial artist that's meditating under a waterfall, that, like, a lot of Americans sort of view with martial artists, it's bullshit, right? Like, martial artists are human beings. You know, and a lot of them, when you get down to the nitty gritty about who they actually were, they weren't perfect people that were like nice and they were humble. Like, I mean, a lot of them were like fighters who went out and beat the crap out of other people in order to say my martial art's better than yours. And they had all kinds of other, like, what we would consider like flaws as a human being. And they weren't usually necessarily nice, humble people.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the issue, because we think about martial arts and we put this thing on it, like with boxing, it's okay to talk trash because they're fighters. But martial artists, they're supposed to be humble and all this stuff. But that's not the reality of what most martial artists kind of were. You know, and I think that that's kind of a misconception. They're human beings. So they're human beings, are going to be flawed. They're going to say crazy stuff. And that's what you have to be with. Now, as far as getting into jiu-jitsu, I think if whatever we're doing to make more people see jiu-jitsu is a better thing. The more people that watch jiu-jitsu, the better off it's going to be for all of us. And so if trash talking helps accomplish that, that's fine. The only thing that I would say is that, again, going back to it doesn't only have to be trash talking to gain attention. The problem is that people get lazy, right? You can gain connections with audiences in lots of different ways. By using your own personality that you already have and just basically cranking the dial up to 11, so to speak, right? So you can basically make this exaggerated persona of yourself. I mean, even me, okay? I'm a regular dude from Kentucky, some random white guy from Kentucky, and somehow everybody in the world knows me as a jiu-jitsu guy, right? Like, I get messages from all over the world. I go out to places. I get stopped whenever I go to an airport, which is, it's super, super cool. If I go to a competition, people are coming up to me, and it's just this constant thing during the day. And it's an amazing experience. I'm really happy about it. Well, the person that people know me as is kind of an exaggerated version of myself. Now, it's not, I mean, it's still genuine. It's who I am. Like, when people meet me, one of the things they say is, Chew, you're like the same guy in person that you are in the videos, of course. But like when I teach classes, when I do videos, it's this performance. It's an exaggerated version of myself, because if I've got ideas or techniques or whatever it is that I'm excited about, I got to give them to you, and I have to be excited about them, because if I'm not excited about it, you're not going to give a shit about them either, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to play that. We have to do that. It's a performance zone, so to speak. And all of us have multiple personas or social masks that we wear with different people. The way you are with your children is going to be different than the way you are with your wife, the way you are with your family, the way you are with colleagues and coworkers, and then the way you are with your best friends. We change depending on what's going on. And so the deal is that you can play the trash talk bad guy, because it's very easy to play the heel. You just have to be like not nice, right? But you can also connect to people, and you can be the good guy, or you can be the guy who has a different personality. It just takes a lot of work, you know, and that's the deal. And I think that a lot of times it's hard. It's not easy. And so people just revert back to, all right, I'm just going to talk trash. It's easy. I can just say some crazy stuff, and then people will pay attention, you know? And I think that, again, it's a cheap way to do it. Sometimes people do it because they like doing it. And I think sometimes it's just simply a cheap way to do it. It's another way to do it. But I think there's lots of different ways to do that, besides just talking trash. So in a perfect world, what that would look like is you'd have jiu-jitsu guys who are all doing their jiu-jitsu, but we're also working on their persona, so to speak. And it would be almost like pro wrestling, where basically you would have really good, we would do jiu-jitsu, and the jiu-jitsu would be really good, right? The jiu-jitsu would keep growing, but then you would have all these guys having these different personas that they crafted that would make it interesting, where it wasn't just bad guys against, like, not everybody's just talking trash to each other. You'd have some guys playing like the good guy, some guys playing the bad guy, some guys playing the guy that's kind of in the middle, you know what I mean? And you don't know which way they're going to sway, and all that kind of stuff. And it could be very, very interesting. Because I think if you had that kind of dynamic, if everybody was on board with that, you'd have a sport that would be really interesting. I mean, it would be like watching like pro jiu-jitsu, you know, like with like real jiu-jitsu moves, you know, real submissions, and guys are really going against each other. But you have like the quality of people like being charismatic and interesting with these personas that they craft.
Yeah, well, like, I think I'm not a huge pro wrestling fan. Sorry if that offends anybody, but like, I love the personalities in pro wrestling. Like, when I was younger, I'd watch, The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin, and like some of those guys, like The Rock initially was like this heel, right? He was like this really like unlikable character, and some the pro wrestlers did really well, and they had quite a big following doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But when he switched to like the good guy, like that's when he kind of started going. And I think the same thing with Stone Cold. I think he was kind of like this.
He was in the
kind of
middle. Stone Cold was kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
It's like he was a good guy technically, but you know, Stone Cold I think was interesting for the times because he was like the blue collar guy that was basically saying "F it" to the man.
Yeah.
You know, but he was the guy that could go either way because he was a good guy. He's like kind of like a Wolverine character where he's like a good guy technically, but he does some stuff that's not technically good.
Right.
So therefore, it's like, where does he belong? You know,
but it's just interesting to see like see that the same person just take on a little bit of different characteristics and how, you know, and I don't know, like I think going back to jiu-jitsu, the thing that's appealing about Gordon Ryan is because you hear stories from you see one side, but you also hear things of how he is at his seminars with his fans, with people. Like actually, he's got some there's some layers to him, I think, and I feel like that's appealing because that adds a little bit of kind of like a thought you kind of think about, a little mystery to him. I feel like.
Well, he's also really good.
He is really good.
I mean, he's really good at jiu-jitsu, and he's really good at jiu-jitsu. And again, his is kind of like he put on a persona where he started doing with the King, right? The King Gordon Ryan,
nice,
and dude, he's not. I don't know if he's gonna do like the Cowboy Gordon Ryan or something now, but he and it really made a lot of people angry. They would like you would see him. How are you gonna call yourself the King? You didn't beat like Felipe Pena or whatever. It's like, guys, it's his persona. Just like, I mean, it was so interesting to see how people got so angry about it.
He was able, I think, to pull out these emotions out of these people, these jiu-jitsu practitioners that were kind of there for many years, and you saw them as these kind of like very kind of put together, respectful people, and you see these sides come out of them. He was able to pull those things out of them in a really interesting way, and he kind of it almost like made them appear like they're the bad guy in a way.
Yeah,
like they're like he's the good guy, they're the bad guys. So
well, there's a lot of
character.
There's a lot of jiu-jitsu people out there, and I've met some of them who were like closet assholes. You know, like I've met several black belts who were like they put on this nice face, you know, respect and loyalty, and then like behind the scenes, bro, they're terrible people, and they're not nice to people. They're incredibly disrespectful to people, and they'll be the first ones to jump on someone's like friggin' like jump on someone for the smallest little thing, you know, but then they put on this face of respect and all this stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of that. I think sometimes like people put on this front of being these like humble, nice martial artists when it's like, dude, we're all human and we're all trying and we're all fallible and we're all doing our best. You know, but you don't need to overdo it. And so I think that, you know, I think that's another thing where people come in there, like a lot of people that are new to jiu-jitsu or new to martial arts, they look at some of the people that are in the sport and in the martial art itself, and they look at some of these people as if they're infallible. You know, these people are somehow these perfect people, these respectful, You meet some people, you get closer to them, and sometimes you're like, oh, well, I didn't expect that coming from that person because I thought he was like a really nice stand-up guy. But, you know, sometimes there's just everybody's got flaws. And so again, I think going back to it, I think that a lot of times people see this controversial stuff, this trash talk coming into it, and they think that jiu-jitsu was never like that. And it was pretty much always like that. I mean, you can go back to like Hickson fighting the Lucha Libre guys on the beach because so-and-so was talking trash a little bit, and now they're fighting on the beach. Like, well, wait a second. Like, that's not like chill at all, right? I mean, it's like dojo storming was a massive thing. Jiu-jitsu gyms were notorious for being dojo stormers, right? Like, so this idea, I think sometimes we look back at the past and we kind of whitewash it. You know, we kind of basically gloss over all the bad stuff or the stuff that we don't, the unsightly stuff when that stuff happened. Trash talking, controversy, like, you know, that it's always been around because it's human nature. And so now it's taken on a new form where as these guys are starting to get paid money for being entertaining, instead of seeing it on like a kind of a hush hush kind of thing, where basically you might have been on a, like, you might hear about this if you're close to the person. Now it's becoming more wide or more out there because you're trying to be entertaining. The only deal with here's the one thing that I'd say, that my caveat to all this is that don't pull the trigger on being controversial or trash talking if it's not actually making you money or helping you out. Like, I see like a lot of young guys now, like, who are like blue belts. I've seen this a couple times. I've gotten some messages from people who, like, I've gotten blue belts like, hey man, you should have me on your podcast. Da, 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 da. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And I'm like, who are you? You know? And then I'll look at their profile and they're like already like talking trash and being very arrogant and stuff like that. I'm like, well, I get it. I see what you're doing, but you're not there yet. Like, you're not at that level. You're not that skilled yet. Nobody's paying attention to you. So it's like, you're in this little, like, it's like, what, I don't understand why you're doing that. Now, if you're making money for it, if you have like this platform where people are looking at you and you're putting on this persona, that's one thing. It would also be wise to make sure that you keep the persona versus who you are slightly different, unless you just are that way, and then whatever. All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed that podcast. Again, I don't know what you think about trash talk. I'm sure some of you guys don't like that, but just my opinions on it. Again, thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast possible. Charlotte's Web. You can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 to save 20% off the order. And again, I encourage everybody to give it a whirl. Try it out for a month. See what you think about it. Again, I originally started using it to help reduce inflammation in my muscles after training. And it definitely did that. It helped out big time. And then I noticed that it also helped with things like stress. It helped me deal with the stress a little bit better in day-to-day life. And so again, check it out for a month and see what you think about the product. And again, use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 at checkout. Also, thanks to Matt at Epic Roll for helping support the podcast. You can check him out at epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off your order, whether you're buying a gi, rash guard, shorts, a t-shirt, whatever it might be. Thanks to Manscaped for helping make the podcast possible. Manscaped.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping on whatever you buy. And again, they make terrific products, and they're well made, and everything that I've used from them has been high quality, and the smelling type stuff has smelled amazing. So give them a try. And again, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the-Jiu-Jitsu-podcast. And if you'd like to join my email newsletter, you can do so by going to jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. I'll send you 3 free ebooks for joining up, and you'll get access to my daily email that I send out typically Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekend. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next week.